Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, the Ukraine War News Update, the third part thereof for the 17th of April 2025. We're going to talk about geopolitical news concerning the war in Ukraine, concerning Ukraine particularly. We're going to start with Ursula von der Leyen from Europe telling Zeit newspaper, the West as we know it or knew it no longer exists. Europe is still a peace project. We don't have bros or oligarchs making the rules. We don't invade our neighbours, and we don't punish them. And I think that's a good place to start off today. Right. Okay. Let's go next to a French court enforcing a $5 billion Crimea damages award against Russia in a Naftogaz case. So Naftogaz, a Ukrainian entity. The decision allows Naftogaz to begin legal recovery efforts in France, including seizing Russian state assets to satisfy the award. This is a really big thing, actually, allowing Russian assets within France to be used to go towards the payment of $5 billion to Naftogaz. At the same time, European officials have abandoned the idea of banning imports of Russian LNG, liquefied natural gas, due to uncertainty in the alternative sources market. And that's the problem here, is that you're now having a trade war with the US, and you would probably be seeking to replace the Russian natural gas or Russian LNG with, or Russian gas probably is LNG though as well, because you have gas in its normal gas form coming through pipelines, and that's obviously being shut off. So then you want the liquefied version to be transported. If you can't use, say, Nord Stream, and that's gas getting turned into liquid form to make it easier to transport. But that is something that the Americans do very well, and they are now market leaders in exporting LNG, and that would be, I presume, one of the big alternative sources. But then, since the EU is just about to be engaged in a huge trade war with the United States, then actually jumping from Russia to the US is not that much of a viable option. I don't know if that's the details behind this, but they want to develop a new roadmap instead, which will allow ending dependence on Russian energy by 2027. European Commission and EU governments are wary of creating a new dependence on the US, the third largest gas supplier to the bloc after Russia and Norway. Obviously, Norway can try and step up some, but it goes to show where the US is at the moment and how the perceptions of the US are manifesting themselves in Europe. We are wary of the United States. They are not the ally they were 3 months ago. For the first time in history, the Czech Republic has become completely independent of Russian oil supplies. As Prime Minister Petr Fiala has stated, this happened after increasing the capacity of the TAL and EIKL pipelines. Oil comes from the Italian port of Trieste, and then you get a pipeline coming up through here and into Czechia. This happened after increasing those pipeline rates. Now the Czech Republic can pump up to 8 million tons of crude oil per year from Western pipelines, which will fully cover the consumption of oil refineries in the Czech Republic. They have replaced Russian oil, so that's really impressive from Czechia. The Russian ruble has become the top performing currency amid Trump's trade war and peace hopes. The ruble has appreciated by 38% against the dollar in over-the-counter markets since the start of the year, outpacing gold's 23% rise, Bloomberg has reported. However, it's not great for Russia, because I think that makes oil exports more problematic, and what with the price of oil going down and the ruble appreciating, actually it puts Russia in a somewhat weak position there. Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico says he will defy the EU and attend Putin's 9th of May celebrations in Moscow. This is Victory Day celebrations in Moscow. The problem for the EU, as it's found out and done little to address, is when a rogue extremist is elected who sides with the enemy, there is no easy route to expelling a country. And this is where we have news about then Serbia in the same context, although Serbia is not a member of the EU but wants to join the EU, or at least so they claim. Serbia's part of the EU will be blocked if President Vucic attends Russia's May the 9th parade, EU officials have told the Daily Telegraph. However, an update is that Vučić is to attend Moscow's May the 9th victory parade despite EU pushback. Serbian President Vučić reiterated on the 16th that he intends to travel to Moscow for the Russian President Putin's victory parade despite EU's pressure, according to the Associated Press. I hope the EU come true on their word then. Serbia also grants hundreds of passports to Russian elites tied to the invasion of Ukraine, granting them access to the EU. Now, I don't know how that works because, of course, they're not a member of the EU, but I don't know whether there is some backdoor mechanism that allows those Russians to be able to get into the EU more easily. Recipients include allies of Chechnya's Ramzan Kadyrov and executives tied to Rostec and construction in occupied Ukraine, according to The Insider. That is a real issue. And again, the EU should be strong with Serbia and say, look, you guys stay away now. Trump administration has lifted sanctions on Antal Rogan, a close ally of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Previously accused of corruption, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that keeping Rogan on the sanctions list was contrary to US foreign policy interests. Really? Really? Or is he just a mate of Donald Trump? Like the previous American government understood and had him sanctioned, and one presumes he's sanctioned by the EU. Now the US has lifted it because the US don't have a moral compass anymore under the Trump administration. At least the government doesn't. The US has lifted that global Magnitsky sanction on, so that's going to really annoy Bill Browder, responsible for the Magnitsky sanctions on Hungarian minister in Trump's gift to Orban. That is just pretty sickening. On the other hand, the US warns Hungary on their growing ties towards China. This has always been a tension that has been bubbling in the background. While Trump and Heritage Foundation and the Republican right, the MAGA right, have really loved Viktor Orban, he's been existing in the orbit of both China and Russia in the Belt and Road Initiative, allowing lots of investment in Hungary, and obviously under the sphere of influence of Russia as well. Whereas Trump's administration seems to be fairly friendly with Russia, they're not so friendly with China at the moment, and this puts Hungary in a difficult position. Top US diplomat in Budapest has urged Hungary to show vigilance over deepening Chinese investments, cautioning that they may clash with US strategic interests. Hungary has drawn 44% of China's recent European investments. 44% of China's European investments have gone into Hungary. Now, if elected in 2026, I will end Hungary's international isolation caused by Orban. That is a declaration of Peter Magyar, the opposition leader of Hungary's party TIZSA, addressing a massive crowd in Budapest. Quote, Hungary will once again be a proud and reliable ally, he promised, drawing a clear line between the pro-Russian stance of Orban and a potential return to European solidarity. According to recent polls, TIZSA is currently leading ahead of Orban's ruling Fidesz party, signalling a political shift that could reshape Hungary's foreign policy. Notably, a poll conducted by Magyar's team shows that 58.18% of over 1.1 million respondents support Ukraine's accession to the European Union, a sharp contrast to the Kremlin-friendly rhetoric we've seen from Hungary's current leadership. If Orban is Putin's man in the EU, Magyar may soon become the one who slams that door shut. Russia has asked the USA for permission to buy Boeing airplanes at an expense of funds frozen. During the peace talks on Ukraine, the Kremlin has asked the White House to authorize the purchase of US Boeing airplanes at the expense of central bank assets frozen due to the invasion. Bloomberg quoted a source among Russian officials as saying. Of course, Boeing are going to be desperate to sell planes somewhere because China's cancelled all their orders. And as I told you in my breaking news update this morning, the US has joined the Axis of Evil in voting on a draft resolution against cooperation between the UN and the Council of Europe. They voted with Belarus, North Korea, Eritrea, Mali, Sudan, Niger, Nicaragua, and of course the Russian Federation. That's who the United States friends are at the moment. Not even China voted against that resolution. Absolute insanity. Now, the US will make any bilateral agreements with Russia and will not make any bilateral agreements with Russia, and will not ease sanctions until a ceasefire is reached in Ukraine, says State Department spokesman Tammy Bruce. This is actually welcome from Tammy Bruce. Definitely good that the US are not completely capitulating to Russia. There will be no negotiations, no decisions, no agreements until this bloodshed stops. So that's good news, at least. But then we're back onto bad news. Oh my goodness. So Ed Martin, Donald Trump's pick for US attorney in DC, has failed to disclose 150 plus appearances on Russian state media. This is who Trump wants in charge of the law in DC. My goodness. Timothy Snyder says the ones who support dictatorship abroad support dictatorship here. The ones who lie for Putin lie for Trump. DC attorney nominee has appeared dozens of times on Russian state media. Actually, it's more than dozens, 150 times on RT. So paid up by RT, no doubt. Lied about it. And if he's going to lie about that, what else is he going to lie about? And of course, it shows his affiliation with Russia. Are there any more clues that you need if you want to understand who Trump really is? Now, somebody he's not the worst, right? Dan Kane, but he doesn't qualify for the position that he's been put in, which is the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. So the previous Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was a black guy, was in not because he's black, because actually he checked all the boxes that allow him to qualify. So they're trying to get rid of DEI hire, the US at the moment. Oh, we don't want any person of color anywhere near anything. Thank you very much, says the Trump administration. So they're getting Dan Kane, saying that we want to hire on merit. We want merit, not hiring people because they're a person of color. Okay, brilliant. Okay, let's show us what you're made of then. Who are you getting in as a Joint Chiefs of Staff, and how does he qualify on the basis of merit? Oh, he doesn't. He literally doesn't have what it takes to be nominated. So therefore, it requires Donald Trump to sign a waiver because he doesn't meet all the criteria to be the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is absolute insanity. Doing away with DEI under the pretense of it's not meritocratic, and then just hiring your mates and loyal people. Dan Kane said something like, "I'll follow him to the ends of the earth," or so he said some kind of rhetorical flourish about how much he supported Donald Trump, and so that's the guy that Donald Trump wants in charge. The slight bit of good news is he's not bad on Ukraine, Dan Kane. He's not the worst on Ukraine, but just absolutely outrageous that this is a guy that is nominated. Okay, talking about people in positions in the Department of Defense, Pentagon has put a third top advisor to Pete Hegseth on leave as part of a leak probe. So I almost reported one of them yesterday. I forget his name. Is it Cave? Anyway, now Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to Deputy Secretary of Defense Stephen Feinberg, has been escorted out of the building. That's 3 people escorted out of the building for leaks. 2 top Hegseth advisors have also been suspended. The leaks under investigation include military operational plans for the Panama Canal, a second carrier headed to the Red Sea, Elon Musk's controversial visit to the Pentagon. That's really crazy. So Elon Musk was going to go to the Pentagon to meet about China, and now we're hearing that Trump was like, what the hell is he doing at the meeting? Shows there's a division between the two. He's like, get him out. Anyway, and pausing the collection of intelligence to Ukraine. Chaos going on in the Department of Defense there. Now, Putin has praised Elon Musk as visionary and likens him to the Soviet-era space icon Korolev, who was, interestingly, Ukrainian-born. Russian President Vladimir Putin on April the 16th lauded US tech billionaire Elon Musk as a trailblazing visionary, comparing him to the legendary Ukrainian-born Soviet rocket scientist Sergei Korolev. Again, shows you who the Russians think, or who the Kremlin thinks is a useful idiot in the American administration there. Now, Trump was said to have been rankled by the events of that Sunday, the one after the White House meeting between Zelensky, Trump, and J.D. Vance. Not merely Zelensky's royal visit, but that sight of Europe hugging him close, according to Politico. A UK official said Trump's team, quote, didn't like the look of it. And I talked about how there was this really, I think, quite subtly done, but very well done riposte to the United States from the United Kingdom. So Zelensky was literally kicked out of the White House, came straight to the UK, got to meet King Charles, was met with really warm hugs with Keir Starmer going down the road to meet him and bring him back to the White House, had that very warm meeting, loads of physical warmth there, and then that very kind goodbye to him at the White House as well. And I was saying that was a really clever kind of sticking two fingers up to the US. Well, apparently the US didn't like it. They didn't like the look of it, the way the whole love-in landed, and suggested the US reaction pushed Britain toward putting more pressure on Ukraine to come to the table in the days that followed. Zelensky freshly enraged Trump that Sunday evening by holding a 72-minute interview with journalists in a small room at London's Stansted Airport just before he left the UK. And that was, I showed you a part of that. In it, he said a peace deal was still very, very far away. Some officials believe that this was the trigger that prompted Trump to halt military aid to Ukraine barely 24 hours later. Of course, Donald Trump really is incredibly thin-skinned. US Secretary of State Rubio and Trump's Special Envoy Witkoff are set to travel there today in Paris to meet Ukrainians and discuss also Gaza too. Witkoff will meet the French President Macron, while Rubio will speak with the Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot. And of course, they're not going to go to. When will they dare to go to Kiev? Well, of course, they're not going to. And indeed, yesterday or the other day, Zelensky invited the US president to visit Ukraine. However, yesterday the White House announced that Trump does not plan to travel to Ukraine. Of course, he doesn't. He doesn't have the coconuts to do that. David D, a very much a Republican, pro-Ukrainian military guy from America, says, I've been stating for a while now that USA is going to F around and be cut out of the Ukraine post-war rebuilding and deals. It looks like it will happen. Europe, Turkey and China are making deals and not the US. That's 100% on Trump. Interesting how, helping out Ukraine, there are returns on investment that these countries are going to seek to get in terms of having deals for reconstruction. At the moment, the European Reconstruction Bank is heavily involved. There are these institutions, entities, and countries involved, but the US is cutting off themselves from Ukraine, really. And I don't think Ukraine are going to want to give any contracts to the US the way that the US is going at the moment. There's a minerals deal, but outside of that, they're going to be not friendly, I think, to the American overtures to support reconstruction. Tim White says a blow to Ukraine's power generation plans as Bulgaria suddenly blocks the proposed sale of 2 nuclear reactors. I'm not sure what underwrites this, but Deputy Prime Minister Atanas Zafarov says these reactors are not for sale, but they are a key asset for Bulgaria, part of its energy independence. Ukraine hoped to use them in the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant, so I don't know what the situation is there, but obviously not good news for Ukraine. Finland's decided to keep its eastern border against neighbouring Russia closed until further notice. That keeps happening. They have been claiming that the Russians are using it. They're weaponizing migration through the borders by trying to motivate people from going, from all around the world to go through Russia to get to that border and then get over the border into Finland and cause social cohesion problems. So Finland have closed the border. Now, the US is apparently preparing a massive build-up in the Middle East as the Yemeni civil war prepares to reignite. Hunterbrook tracked hundreds of US Air Force cargo flights in CENTCOM over the past month, seeing a nearly 400% increase as the US deployed numerous assets. So this appears to be a very profligate time for cargo flights into Middle Eastern air bases. They appear to be ramping up, ready for some war with Yemeni, the Houthis, Iran. Who knows? It's all going crazy, no doubt. Trump personally ordered the cancellation of a Pentagon briefing that, and this is what I referenced just earlier, that allegedly was to reveal Washington's secret plans in the event of a conflict with China to Elon Musk. And actually, this is the first sensible thing I've heard Donald Trump say, which is, what the hell is Musk doing here? Make sure he doesn't show up. Source quotes Trump as saying, indicating that the president, quote, personally ordered his staff to cancel the meeting. And that's one that caused all that controversy previously, and it got cancelled as it got kind of leaked. And that's kind of reference to that being leaked in the DOD, and why you've had these leakers now kicked out of the Pentagon. 3 of them marched off. Yeah, there we go. Part 1 of these was about that meeting with Musk, and that's good that that was leaked, and that then prompted Trump to kick Musk out, it appears. So there might be a more of a tense relationship between these two than we had previously imagined. Musk has certainly been a lot quieter for the last 3 weeks, I would guess. Ever since the kind of that period, and when the Tesla dealerships were getting laid into and Doge was becoming more and more unpopular, it seems to have simmered down a bit. But that's because he's not making these frequent visits to the Oval Office and making these big bold statements and whatnot. So he was kicked out of that. Well, that meeting was cancelled on Trump's own orders. And of course, Musk, there's that contradiction, that conflict of interest, where Musk really benefits from a relationship with China and indeed Russia. And of course, both of those nations should be, you would imagine, would otherwise be relationships that the American government treat with great caution and care. And, they should look at someone like Putin with disdain. But now it seems to have switched, although China is the enemy number one as far as Trump's concerned. And Musk is in the middle saying, no, we don't want these tariffs to be put on China because that's going to hurt his business big time. And so he's kind of caught in the middle. So a meeting with Musk about, potential secret plans in the event of a conflict with China would place very sensitive information in the mind of someone who is arguably compromised by China. Zelensky's met with, as we know, with Mark Rutte the other day, but there's just another quote I wanted here, which is Mark Rutte assuring that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. Nothing has changed. When we said Ukraine would become a member of NATO, we didn't promise it would be a part of a peace agreement. In other words, they are still going to be a part of NATO, but it just might not happen immediately. Then I reported yesterday the anonymous hacktivist collective has released 10 terabytes of leaked data. I don't know if any of this is of particular import. I guess people are going to be going through it a day, but it does include information on all businesses operating in Russia, all Kremlin assets in the West, pro-Russian officials, and more. So it could be an incredibly controversial trove of data, or not, to be seen. And Georgia, sadly, is sliding deeper into authoritarianism. The new Georgia Dream imposed law forces international donors, so this is the foreign agents law that's getting even more oppressive, to get government approval before funding NGOs, media or civic groups. So that means that no EU or foreign aid can reach independent voices unless cleared by the very regime trying to silence them. This is pure state capture. The goal: punish protesters, crush critical media, and fund only regime-friendly NGOs. Georgia Dream claims it's about transparency. In reality, it's repression, straight out of Lukashenko's playbook in Belarus. As if this wasn't enough, banks are being forced to hand over over personal data of civil society leaders under bogus charges of sabotage. The regime is all using captured courts to justify it. EU friends, this cannot go unanswered. We need to impose sanctions, do a full EU Georgia policy review, and call for new elections. We cannot let Georgia Dream turn Georgia into Belarus. It is going that way. There needs to be much greater support, I think, from the EU, from allies, and from the United States. The United States don't give a toss, though, particularly at the moment, do they? Although there was that bill that was passed recently. Keir Starmer, this is what I was saying in my tariffs video. Keir Starmer is being forced into having to do this trade deal with the United States, as every nation is really, to try and reduce the tariffs as much as possible. But the US have said that the UK must repeal hate speech laws that protect LGBT people or lose the Trump trade deal, plus sacrifice the NHS, food, environmental standards, workers' rights. So as someone says here, no thank you, don't want to be the 51st state of America, better to join the EU single market. This is, I think, something that the UK has to reject. I think we've just got to get closer with Europe, and this is what the Trump trade deal will force us to do, and it becomes then counterproductive. As I was saying in the tariff video, Trump and Putin are aligned with wanting the UK to exit the EU. They both wanted that because they both saw the EU as a threat and a competitor rather than an ally. Obviously, Russia, that's more obvious, but for Trump, he didn't see the relationship with the EU as a positive sum game. He saw it as a zero sum game, as he sees everything. So that was an alliance. It was the EU being competitors, and you'd rather the competitor was weakened, and the UK being out of the EU would weaken both. And so Trump was not up for that. So now that we're out of the EU, rather than trying to draw us even more into the orbit of the United States, actually Trump's probably playing this quite badly. He's ideologically, or the people around him ideologically, want us to be MAGA US. So they want, the idea that we need better free speech is not free speech. They want us to curtail free speech and screw anyone over that doesn't say what they want. They want their anti-woke agenda in the UK. They want blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff that they're really big on at the moment. That Trump, that Heritage Foundation Project 2025 guidebook tells you about. That's what they want the UK to be, and they won't do a trade deal unless we kind of sign up to all these things. And the reality is they are going to push us closer to the EU and rejoining the EU perhaps, which is kind of not what Trump would actually want. So just watch out for this. This is exactly what I predicted some time ago. The reduction of workers' rights, health and safety, all these sort of things. Look at the entity called NICE that does all our NHS drug pricing. I said that will be on a chopping block, and that's probably what is the case here. I don't know if there's anything mentioned about the NHS in this article, no, but is what the other person was saying here. NHS being sacrificed, that's likely to be NICE rather than the NHS. So they are what 25% of the world judges their drug pricing on, and so the big pharma in the US really don't like the organization NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, is it, or whatever? They negotiate our drug prices in the UK for the NHS, whereas the US doesn't have drug price negotiations, not centralized, and that's why drugs are so expensive in the US, because they don't get to bargain it down, and the government don't seem to want to do that because they're so heavily lobbied by the big pharma industry over there, and so nothing gets changed, and the big pharma would like that to be the case in the UK, and that's going to be, I would presume, some of the strings attached to the potential trade deal with the US. And so, yeah, I think we just stand up to the US and say, screw you, and just take that hit with regard to tariffs, and hopefully the US will learn that if everyone's doing that to the US, then the US will get screwed over, and we'll be able to mitigate those losses by working together amongst each other as allies, with the EU, even with China, and all these other big players around the world, and India, Australia, Japan, the global south, and the US loses out. They lose out economically, but annoyingly, actually for me, they'll lose out politically in terms of global national security stability, because they've just either joined the wrong side or just gone off to play with themselves, and rather than engaging with the rest of the world. So, Trump, what are you doing, mate? What are you doing? Anyway, that's enough from me. That's enough for the geopolitics video today. Please remember to pop over to Car for Ukraine, to our Easter Paisanki fundraiser. At the moment, we at ATP Geopolitics are in 8th place among all the YouTubers. I've only sort of announced this yesterday, really, so it'd be great to skip up to at least 5th. I'd like that, just ahead of Rick the Ukrainian and Silicon Curtain, and oh my goodness, those horrible YouTubers. No, tremendously good people, but it'd be nice to get up there. So please click on the link below, atpgeo.com/donate, and you will arrive at this page to be able to contribute to the campaign. In the meantime, take care. Speak to you soon.